Armenia Titizian.
And I'm Rubina Margosian, and this is the Week in Review.
Every week we bring you the stories shaping Armenia and the region.
From politics and policy to social issues and conflict, we break down the news and what it means for you.
This week in the news, government sets out 5-year agenda under the Real Armenia doctrine. Armenia and India expand defense partnership. Another serviceman dies in a non-combat incident, and the iconic Zvartnots terminal building to be spared from demolition. These stories and more in our weekly roundup of the news.
This week, Armenia's government approved its 2026-2031 programs, setting out its priorities for the next 5 years. The document, which still requires parliamentary approval, is built around the Real Armenia ideology, civil contracts, election platform, and the government's long-term economic transformation strategy. On foreign policy, the government's top priorities remain institutionalizing the peace with Azerbaijan, continuing border delimitation, and advancing the normalization of relations with Turkey. It also pledges to deepen strategic ties with the European Union, the United States, France, India, China, Iran, and Georgia, while redefining its relationship with Russia and continuing cooperation with the Eurasian Economic Union. The program describes peace as the country's primary security guarantee, while reaffirming plans to modernize the armed forces, transition to a professional army, and strengthen Armenia's defense industry, intelligence capacities, and cybersecurity. It also reiterates that demilitarized role is to defend Armenia's internationally recognized territory. Domestically, the government promises sweeping reforms, including the introduction of universal healthcare insurance, judicial reform, the adoption of a new constitution, and continued efforts to combat corruption. It also aims to build a more competitive, knowledge-based economy, positioning Armenia as a regional hub for artificial intelligence through new research centers, data infrastructure, and workforce training. The program also outlines a new approach to diaspora relations centered on the Real Armenia concept and encouraging professional repatriation and closer institutional cooperation. And perhaps the most controversial section concerns the Armenian Apostolic Church. The government says it intends to reform the church by removing its current leader, appointing an interim head, adopting a new charter, electing a new Catholicos, and increasing transparency in church finances.
This week, Armenia's High-Tech Ministry and India's Defense Ministry signed an MOU on cooperation in defense research and development, innovation, and joint production. The agreement marks another step in Armenia's increasingly important defense partnership with India. It came during the visit to Yerevan by India's Defense Secretary Rajesh Kumar Singh, who held high-level meetings with Defense Minister Suren Babikyan and Chief of the General Staff Edward Asaryan. Defense ties between Armenia and India have intensified this year. India's Chief of Defense Staff visited Yerevan back in February, the first such visit during which Armenia publicly showcased some of the Indian defense systems it has acquired in recent years. Asaryan visited India in April, where the two sides discussed potential joint ventures to develop military hardware. The relationship is therefore moving beyond just Armenia purchasing arms toward a deeper defense industrial cooperation.
And Armenia's Deputy Foreign Minister Vahan Kostanyan traveled to Ukraine, becoming the first senior Armenian official to visit the country since Russia's invasion of 2022. Prime Minister Pashinyan's wife, Anna Hagopian, had attended the summit of First Ladies in Kiev in early September of 2023, but that's that. Kostanyan met with his Ukrainian counterpart, Alexander Mishchenko, to discuss their cooperation agenda. The sides stressed the importance of advancing stable and lasting peace. Mishchenko said Kiev hopes Yerevan will continue its pro-European course, adding that Ukraine is ready to share its experience in that process. Pashinyan and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky spoke by phone this week, with Zelensky saying that Ukraine-Armenia relations are becoming even more constructive and stressed the importance of continuous dialogue. Armenia has kept neutrality in the Russo-Ukrainian war from day one, including in UN General Assembly votes. In June of 2023, Prime Minister Pashinyan stated in an interview that Armenia is not Russia's ally in the war with Ukraine. In February of 2024, he reiterated that Armenia recognizes Ukraine's territorial integrity according to the 1991 borders.
And Russia's veterinary and phytosanitary watchdog is demanding Armenia submit the findings of its investigation into alleged violations of Eurasian Economic Union rules, along with a concrete action plan for bringing its exporters into compliance. Moscow, as we know, has restricted imports of various Armenian goods for months, citing alleged violations. Pashinyan said Armenia is ready to offer full transparency and joint inspections to address Russian concerns, framing Yerevan's approach as open to dialogue while stressing that diversification is the only lasting safeguard against this kind of situation happening again. Meanwhile, the Armenian government reported that Armenia's exports to EU countries topped 516 million in the first half of 2026, up more than 80% in the same period last year. Pashinyan cited these figures as evidence of progress on diversification, but it's also, Rubina, because the European Union stepped in.
And making it easy.
Yeah, sort of alleviating a lot of the restrictions that would have been on Armenian products. So it will be interesting to see if this is
if we catch up, if we actually, make the necessary changes to comply with European markets.
Pashinyan said Armenia will keep pursuing economic diversification regardless of what happens with Russia's market. He said even if Russia's market opened 100% an hour from now, we would still make extra efforts to diversify. Hopefully this is a lesson for everybody that you can't rely on only one market for all of your products. Yeah.
Well, it's also not a decision for the government because, the producer might choose to export to Russian markets rather than European.
Yeah,
so
sure.
Let's see what happens. This is a story that we'll keep coming back to, I'm sure, for a long time. This week, Armenia's parliament voted by secret ballot to elect the chairs of its 12 standing committees. All 8 candidates nominated by the ruling civil contract faction, along with the Armenia Alliance's sole nominee, were elected. None of the 3 candidates put forward by the Strong Armenia faction secured enough votes. Strong Armenia faction head Narek Arapetyan said the faction would nominate candidates and hold votes separately and would use the available speaking time to present their candidates. He argued that the previous candidates had failed because they were not given enough opportunity to introduce themselves to the public.
Well, I think he might have said that, some of the things they said from the podium in the National Assembly was controversial and led to a lot of discussion.
And also they were not very well versed in the spheres that they're supposed to be heading in the parliamentary committees. So, they hadn't done their homework, basically. No. That's what Narek is saying, according to me.
Well, moving on to news that for us and for many in Armenia is absolutely infuriating. A 20-year-old serviceman, Narek Torosyan, was killed in yet another non-combat incident when a truck struck a group of 7 soldiers running along a highway in Jambarag. According to media reports, all 7 are recent conscripts and were supposed to be inside their unit, but were reportedly ordered by an officer to run in body armor and helmets as punishment for being loud. The Defense Ministry said an internal investigation has been ordered. The driver, who himself is a contract soldier, 34-year-old, was returning home in an unregistered truck, which he was driving without a license. I don't know how this is possible, but we saw the truck. We saw the images of the truck. Investigators have opened a criminal case over violations of road safety and vehicle operation rules, and the driver has been arrested. Meanwhile, Defense Minister Suren Babikyan has carried out a series of, what they're calling surprise inspections at military units, frontline positions, and a site where new defense fortifications are under construction. According to the ministry, the inspections focused on combat readiness, discipline, training, and soldiers' technical proficiency. Babikyan has repeatedly said that improving discipline remains one of his top priorities. He also reviewed ongoing work to strengthen frontline positions, which the ministry says is continuing around the clock, and met with conscripts serving on the front line. The tour follows an account that was published earlier this month on Hetk by an Armenian reservist alleging disorganization, equipment failures, and ammunition shortages during mandatory reserve training. Recently, Armenia's defense ministry came under pressure after a wave of non-combat deaths among servicemen, facing criticism over the death toll, Prime Minister Pashinyan dismissed the military police chief and head of the army's moral psychological department, Ashot Zakarian, who had led the military police for roughly 6 years, was replaced by Aram Hovanesyan, a former national police chief. Pashinyan has tied the deaths to what he calls a criminal subculture in the ranks. The defense ministry said a systemic fight against the criminal subculture is underway, and Pashinyan has ordered the creation of an interdepartmental working group to draft solutions. I don't know if it's just the criminal subculture or it's the abject ineffectiveness and inefficiency of the commanding officers to allow these things to happen as well.
Well, my concern is that if the army is not able to deal with elements of criminal subculture,
How are we supposed to deal with it
in actual
society?
violence?
Yeah.
Well, an audio recording from Artsakh's former foreign minister, David Babayan, who is serving a life sentence in Azerbaijan, was released by his family this week. In it, Babayan describes both his trial and appeal proceedings as predetermined and politically motivated. Babayan said the appeals process was little more than a formality before taking the case to an international court. He alleged that court records contained errors, the defense lawyers were repeatedly replaced without explanation, that more than 95% of the charges against the defendants were unsupported by evidence. He said he had been sentenced to life imprisonment on charges of attempted to violently overthrow Azerbaijan's government and constitutional order, despite prosecutors presenting no evidence linking him to such an effort. Babayan also accused the court of replacing evidence with political statements and distorting or omitting defense arguments from the official record. He also raised concerns about his own health and the health of other Armenian detainees, saying he had asked the court to formally document his medical condition.
And Armenia has issued an international tender for design on the Gyumri-Kars Railway, specifically the Akhurik section. This was announced by David Khudatian, the Minister of Territorial Administration. He said construction will follow once a firm is selected, adding that Armenia is going the international tender route because Armenian design and construction companies don't have experience with work of this scale. So it just goes to show you, Rubina, that when we're talking about the construction of TRIP, there aren't enough companies to be able to build this kind of infrastructure.
There might be next to none.
Yeah, probably. And separately, the mayor of Akyaka, this is on the Turkish side, said last month that restoration of the Akyaka-Gyumri rail line is underway and should finish in 2 to 3 months, and that a tender has also been issued for a new road linking Akyaka and Gyumri. The 21-kilometer Armenian stretch is estimated to cost $15 million, and it's still unclear whether Armenia's government or the Russian-run South Caucasus Railway will pay for it. And we know that Armenia's government has been trying to
convince the Russians
to alleviate them of administering or governing or running the Armenia's railways. So we'll see what happens with that.
And a little bit of good news. The old terminal building of Zvartnots airport, including its iconic tower, will not be demolished but converted into a new passenger terminal according to the government's newly adopted program. The building's future became a contentious issue, including in our office.
Yes, including between us.
Between us, after the government circulated a draft proposal to strip it of its status as a national monument. Well, last year, Armenia's international airports, which operates Zvartnots, announced a $500 million decade-long expansion project to accommodate rising passenger demand, including transit traffic. Annual passenger numbers have exceeded 5.5 million over the last 2 years, surpassing the airport's original capacity of 3 to 4 million. The expansion will double the airport's total area, add a new terminal, and increase the number of boarding gates from 6 to 16. Arrival, immigration, and customs areas will also more than double in size, while lounges, parking, and public transportation infrastructure will be expanded.
Can I just say, Rubina, I've been going to the airport a lot lately. Like a lot, more than I care to. And if we don't build a new terminal soon, somebody's gonna lose it. Because it's not that the airport staff isn't working well or the customs aren't working well. They're really trying to accommodate, but when you're having, 5 to 8 flights taking off in the same hour and you simply don't have the space for it, it has been madness, waiting long lines just to check in at customs, at the gates. So I don't know how this is going to be a 10-year long process, because if the current rates of tourism increase, It's going to be interesting.
Well, in my book, it qualifies as a good problem.
Yes, no, of course. But, alongside the bad ones, this is a good problem indeed. And as always, the articles that we published this week, Olesya Vartanyan's Beyond Borders column called Moscow's Test of Loyalty. And she says that after Armenia's elections, Moscow has responded with demands, warnings, and new trade restrictions rather than congratulations, because as we know, Vladimir Putin has yet to congratulate Nikol Pashinyan. As pressure from Russia mounts, Armenia faces a defining question, Olesya writes: return to old dependencies or continue pursuing a more independent and diversified foreign policy.
And we did publish the Statecraft and Governments the piece by Nerses Kopalyan this week. It's called How the Washington Accords Changed the South Caucasus and Made Armenia Safer. It was because the 1-year anniversary of the Washington Accords. Well, Kopalyan examines how the Washington Accords have deepened ties with the United States, accelerated Armenia's technological development, and enhanced its security environment.
And another piece, again looking at sort of Armenia in the region, is called Between Silla and Charybdis, the Geopolitical Labyrinth of the South Caucasus. This is by a first-time contributor to EVN Report, Ferdinand Krikorian, and he says that, or writes rather, that Armenia is redefining its foreign policy after the collapse of the post-Soviet security order, and he explores how strategic diversification and regional connectivity are reshaping the country's role in an increasingly fragmented geopolitical landscape.
Well, from Creative Tech section, we published a piece about Armenia's Technopark, and fittingly it's called Armenia's Flagship Technopark entered the engineering city, and the author just examines if Armenia's flagship Technopark can become more than a cluster of high-tech companies, and takes a look inside engineering city, explores how shared infrastructure, talent, and ambition are helping build a hardware ecosystem, and the challenges that remain before collaboration becomes innovation.
Yeah, it's very interesting how the vision behind it, and we have a lot of great ideas. Let's see how it all comes together. We published a piece again by first-time author to EVN Report, Professor Sepu David Aslanyan. It's called Edward Rafael Gharamyan's Merchant, Reader, and Patron of the Armenian Enlightenment. I had a lot of fun with this. How did an 18th century Armenian merchant's fascination with Roman history help shape modern Armenian education? So Edward Raphael was obsessed with Charles Rowland's book about Roman history, and he thought that it had to be translated into Armenian and that every Armenian had to read it, and that served as his life's mission and the creation of something even more special. So drawing on unpublished archival sources, Aslanyan traces Gharamyan's remarkable journey from Indian Ocean commerce to one of the most consequential acts of cultural patronage in Armenian history, and whoever has been to Venice knows what we're talking about. Please read the article. It's quite academic, but readable, breathable.
And I didn't know that the donation came with a very interesting precondition.
Yes. So that's all we'll say, but you should definitely check it out. Thank you to Professor Aslanyan for trusting his words with us on EVN Report.
And we did publish, Maria, your It Has to Be Said, because it absolutely had to be said.
I know. I'm just getting angrier.
I feel like your title is yelling. It's
legislate.
It's not legislate. It's like legislate.
Enough already.
That's what you're saying this time.
Well, because we've been talking about it forever here, right? We were watching the members of parliament banging on their desks, trying to drown each other out, just sarcastic remarks and just ridiculous statements. It's just like, do your job. We're all working really hard. Do your job. Stop with the antics, kind of a thing. To both sides, to both the opposition and thing. And as my sisters, because of whom I've been going to the airport a lot, are saying, why are you angry all the time? And I said, just try and drive in Yerevan and watch Parliament, And we also put together our July on View, which is what we do every month. We put together everything that we've published into one magazine format. It's called July on View, and it looks at, it was a menagerie of topics and lifestyle and, again, statecraft and governance. A bunch of it has to be said, sort of geopolitics once again, and just the, stories of everyday life as well.
And yes, luckily next week, little less geopolitics on EVN Report,
yes.
the labyrinth of the South Caucasus and its diversifications. And next week we have our lifestyle magazine coming out, so maybe we'll end August with a lighter note.
Yes, indeed. And that's the kind of week it's been here in Armenia. Thank you for listening. Have a safe and peaceful weekend, and we will be back again next week.